Hi, this is Dr. P, and I'm going to talk about 11 things you need to know about getting a job in the video game industry. Now, this is a very brief coverage compared to my class about getting a job in the video game industry, which is 25-30 videos. This thing I'll split into two, but it's still a brief introduction to the idea of what you do to get a job. And this is going to be the hard truth. I'm not here to encourage your dreams. I'm here to introduce you to reality. Encouraging your dreams doesn't do any good. Dreams run rampant among the video game people. They mislead themselves. Working in the game industry may be more fun than most jobs, but it's still part of the adult world. And that's very different from the K-12 world of, quote, wrapping students in cotton wool, unquote, so they won't get hurt. That may be a British phrase, but I think you understand what it means. In K-12, everyone does everything possible to make sure nobody gets hurt. In the real world, few people do that. And the video game industry is part of the real world. So here's a list. I'll cover the first 5 in this part and another 5 in the second part. And I'm not going to read them because I'm going to go through them one by one. So the first one is that competition for jobs is unusually tough in the video game industry. It's tough everywhere these days for young people, but it's extreme in the video game industry. The demand is quite low because the studio system for making big games is not growing and maybe shrinking. The middle tier, the AA tier, is going away if it's not actually gone. You have some AAA studios and then everybody else at a very low level. And at the same time, the supply of wannabe game developers has grown. And it's becoming easier to make games so more people can contemplate doing it. Worldwide, there's like 500 game creation degrees offered, different schools. And all those people obviously are wanting to come into the video game industry, plus all the people who are self-taught. So, not only is it hard to get a job, the employees are poorly treated because there's always more where you came from. There's always more people wanting those entry-level jobs. So as an alternative, in the past several years, many developers have started out as indies or independents in mobile games usually. And this used to work for some people. And occasionally it works really outstandingly well, but very rarely. Now it's just about impossible to make a living this way because the median game earnings on the Apple Store, and people are willing to pay more for Apple games than for Android games, is $500. So you sweat bullets and put a lot of time into a game, vast amount of time, and you get $500. That's not going to help you make a living very much. Unfortunately, free-to-play and digital distribution has caused consumers to become accustomed to paying nothing for games. And furthermore, the pie is split too many ways. There are just too many games, hundreds of thousands of games. Next point, you have to start at the bottom and work your way up. Of course, everyone would like to be at the top, but in every walk of life, virtually no one starts at the top. Experience really does help make you better if you take advantage of it. So one reason why people would go indie was to be their own boss. But in that situation, often they needed a full-time job to make a living, and then they made games almost as a hobby and hoped that they would end up making a lot of money and hoped that if they were lucky, they would then be able to make a living making video games. But that's becoming more and more difficult. You need to prepare yourself. You don't have to get a game degree, but you need skills and you need to demonstrate those skills. You'll hear this again and again. You need to show what you can do. Enthusiasm, passion doesn't count. There are thousands of passionate wannabe game makers. That doesn't differentiate you from anybody else. You need actual skills, something you can do successfully and promptly. It can't take a real long time because game studios can't afford to take a long time. Whether this is programming or art or sound or design, you've got to be able to do something and show you can do it. Keep in mind though, hardly any new person is hired as a game designer. Maybe some are hired as level designers, but it's quite uncommon. It's much more common that the new people are programmers or art people or sound people and all the other things that go other than design. Now put yourself in the place of an employer. Employers hire by action, not intention. In a way, this is another side of showing what you can do. Employers can't go by your intentions. You may have great ideas, you think you're going to make great games, but if you haven't made games, you are nothing. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. It seems that the younger generation judges intention as almost as important as action these days, but employers can't do that because it would cost them a lot of money. And their job is to make money. That's why they're in the business. Their job is not to satisfy your dreams. So, you've got to show that you have done things, not that you intend to do things. Consequently, a degree is not going to help you in and of itself. If you take a degree, it shows that you've put a lot of time into something, but you still have to show that you can make games. Of course, think about the video game industry. For many years, there was no video game degree. They didn't exist. When I finished graduate school in 1981, a military history degree was one of the better degrees you could have for making games, or at least for designing games. All the computers were still mainframes, and you didn't make mainframe games. You couldn't make money off of mainframe games. So everybody was self-taught. Now the degrees are common, though unfortunately many of the schools are mostly clueless, or they're actually taking advantage of students and conning them. So it's still the case you're defined by what you've done, not by your degree. Now, this is changing because it's changing gradually in all industries. Employers can't be sued for hiring someone with a degree. Companies large enough to have human resources departments frequently have people there who don't understand what the skills are that people are being hired for, so they go by degrees because that's easy. Oh, this person has a degree, this person doesn't. The person who doesn't have a degree tossed out. That hasn't happened yet in the video game industry, but it is coming because it's already happened in a great many other industries. The video game industry is not very stable. Even quite large studios that have made famous games disappear, and it can be quite sudden. I know one person who went into academia after he'd had several companies disappear under him. He'd successfully designed 6 or 7 published video games, but he got tired of his companies dying. How can that happen? Well, a studio can have one or more successful games, and they are paid for that game while they're making it, but frequently the game doesn't make further royalties. So if they can't get funding for a new game, usually before the previous one is actually published, then when they finish the published one and no money is coming in, they close. They have no choice. There are a few studios like Blizzard who make so much money in royalties that they don't have that problem, but they're very much the exception. More in part 2.